And a very warm welcome it is to you. Thank you so much for staying with us here on ZBC TV. You are tuned into Economics 101, your number one program that takes a look at all things to do with the gross domestic product, as well as everything that the Zimbabwean economy can contribute to the tracking of a Vision 2030, as well as achieving an upper middle income economy by the year 2030. And yes, my name is Kurtley Gwindi. In studio today, we are talking all things agriculture, and to join me in unpacking issues to do with grain, as well as much of the matters to do with the agricultural space as a whole in our economy. Zimbabwe is a big contributing factor, this agriculture. I am joined in a studio by the Traditional Grain Association chairman, as well as an agronomist and someone who has very, very keen interest with regards to the analysis of the economy as a whole. And this is none other than Mr. Basil Nyabadza. Thank you so much for joining us here on Economics 101.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely, yes. And welcome to the show. Now, we would like to start by unpacking that Zimbabwe, like any other global economy, has not been spared from the rise in inflation that has seen global banks tightening monetary policies and raising interest to curb the soaring prices. Firstly, as someone with keen interest in this space, like we've rightly put out there to our viewers, we would like to know from you, what can we attribute to these soaring prices?
Well, thank you very much. Well, first and foremost, we are part of a global family. As such, events which take place far away from our shores have got an impact, positive or otherwise. Now, we look at the world economy at this stage, especially food-related, yes, provision of food, supply and demand. I think there is a serious disturbing element in the value chain in terms of provision of food, its production. You look at the current situation within Europe, Russia and Ukraine have been at war. Both are sources of cereals in the main,
absolutely,
which filter throughout other markets throughout the world.
And it's a very, very significant percentage they contribute.
It is, and they've done it consistently, annually. And when there's any disruption, sadly, speculation sets in. And those with capital take positions. They buy in anticipation to sell at a markup. And when that happens, especially when they don't know when the war is going to end, a speculative element sets in, which then limits free availability of some of these products, like wheat.
Absolutely.
And because of that, we have been an importer of some of these products.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, of course, Zimbabwe, we are now in a position where we are growing our own wheat. And in the main, this year, I think we have got a position of food security,
oh yes,
attained by us in our own economy.
Okay.
But there are historical positions, and we look at the future, and of course climate change is now a key player within our economy.
Okay.
So all these factors at macro level affect us. And once the speculative element is heightened, this is when we see inflationary pressures coming in at a rapid pace. And clearly this is not good for the household family.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
And, narrowing it down, the issue then here becomes, the issue around traditional grains, and some will say these are small grains. And if we then look at the contribution that Zimbabwe has been getting from these global players, and obviously coming down to how we are affected by these wars, can we honestly say that the war in Ukraine has affected the global economy to the extent that we have seen soaring prices directly here in Zimbabwe? I know there are issues and factors, like you rightly said earlier in our pre-conversation, that there are things such as the power, there are things such as labor, but can we say that this war is directly speaking to some of the soaring prices we are now being directly affected by here in Zimbabwe?
Well, energy is a factor in our economy at this moment. And we can also look at the cost of money. accessing it on a regular basis, utilization of those funds, very limited given the demand positioning within our economy. And it's fair to say that we can't rule out that the effects that Zimbabwe has been singled out for indifferent treatment when it comes to global financing. In other words, where we source our money, there's a premium. We pay a premium for accessing money.
Oh, yes, yes.
And given that background, it regrettably filters to the household family. Now, let's come to traditional grains, their role in our economy. We are pleased that the name is now traditional grains. We used to call it small grains.
Small grains, yes.
But it's now traditional grains.
Oh, yes.
And we have seen a trajectory of a percentage of growing much more than the previous, I would say, 3-4 years.
Oh, yes.
And this is mostly due to the financing mechanism ushered in by the Second Republic. In other words, they're saying traditional grains are now critical because given the situation pertaining to climate change, we were dependent as an economy on maize as a chief input in our a number of feeding schemes. If you look at our dairy, our beef, our piggery, our poultry, human beings, maize has been the chief input.
Oh, yes.
Now, if we go back a bit, 9 years ago, 9 seasons ago, we used to grow maize successfully with a rain-fed position. But today, and we used to do it in 59 provinces.
Oh, yes.
59 districts.
Okay.
Now we are down to 37, 38 districts. That's quite a dramatic drop.
Oh, yes.
It means it is now clear that we cannot sustain the demand and the usage of maize in all the sectors I pointed out. So we must find alternatives. In doing so, there are challenges. But at least now, there's been extended support through Pfumvudza program in Twasa, where government has had to take a responsibility to say, look, it's better to empower people to grow their own than just to feed them then.
Okay.
So that position where government has taken the financing, accessing seed, fertilizer, chemicals, packaging, has tremendously assisted the small-scale farmer, the communal farmer, even the resettled farmer. Because without finance at a critical time, there is going to be challenges in terms of managing the production cycle.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Nyabadza.
Yeah.
A huge contribution there with regards to the highly commended, this is Pfumvudza Intwasa program, as well as the general outlook on the financing of some of the projects that these farmers who are resettled or small scale have to contribute or have to actually benefit from some of the efforts being put in by government. This is Economics 101. We're going away for a small break, but do stay tuned. And I'm speaking to Mr. Basil Nyabadza, the Traditional Grain Association Chairman. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and this is Economics 101. We are tracking and putting into perspective all things to do with our traditional grains, what we are doing to cultivate as a nation, and promoting as well as conscientizing the people. And you are the people, our viewers. Today in studio, our viewers, you get to hear from the Traditional Grain Association Chairman, who is Mr. Basil Nyabadza. Mr. Basil, thank you so much for staying with us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And how how can you classify traditional grains for the benefit of the common man who is watching and who is looking out to know what exactly it is that we are talking about today on Economics 101?
Okay, now, I think the most common ones are our sorghum, mafunde, munga, millet. We have got nyimo, nzungu, zio, which is our rapoko, groundnuts, roundnuts. We've got sunflower. That's the cluster we tend to talk about.
Absolutely. And how are they strategic to our economy, these particular things?
Now, let's analyze their role. First of all, they are drought resistant. In other words, the amount of water required on maize, on these crops, is much less. Now, even to some extent, the yield, given the input base, the fertilizers you apply, chemicals, the management on the field, it's less demanding, less outflows than maize.
Oh, yes.
But let me go further and say, look, there's a historical aspect here. Now, these crops were not grown as much as we are growing them now. We tended to concentrate on maize, on soybean, tobacco, tea, and those got prominence, those crops. Even financing structures were quite well versed with our banking community. But if you wanted to grow these other crops, there was no sound structure of financing. In fact, they were deemed risky. As a result, the constituency, which really...
So back then, are you saying these were not contributing directly to the economy, therefore the structures didn't exist, or rather their potential to inject right into the economy wasn't realized as of yet?
Let's say the market, especially the financial market, was selective. It was driven by the white community then, and really it was commercialized heavily. And these other grains, we have got ecological regions. If you are in Matabeleland, certainly it's different from Manikaland. Certainly Mash West, Midlands, Gweru, and Mashingo, they all offer different ecological positions.
Yes, absolutely.
Equally, you cannot grow successfully tea in Matabeleland.
Oh, yes.
Neither do you grow tobacco as well as you should perhaps in other regions, in Mash West and so on.
Oh, yes.
Equally citrus.
Yeah.
So the ecological setup of our economy is a contributing factor. And it needs not a blanket approach, but rather a targeted approach. A targeted approach.
Oh, yes, yes.
And this is where, if we want to go back further, we didn't just become Zimbabwe overnight. It was a process. And the process was that funding, there were institutions dedicated for funding the traditional small-scale player. But those traditional funding, like the AFC, Agriculture Finance Corporation.
Yes, yes, yes.
The old Agriculture Finance Corporation and the current one, there's a difference. And really, this is where we had a dedicated financial player looking at Maichimuti in the village. And Maichimuti was comfortable with that. But things changed. We became all high street bankers with all the issues of collateral. And in some cases, where drought occurs, it undermines the confidence of the banker and the farmer, and they don't work together as much as they do. But let's go further a bit. We are also, if I have to be blunt, I think we are careless with value as an economy. This morning, bread left Marondera for Luveve in Bulawayo. To Bulawayo, 600 kilometers, back 600 kilometers, 1,200 kilometers, delivering bread 3 years after independence. That's carelessness on our part.
Oh, yes.
The diesel being used is imported, foreign currency.
Oh, yes.
And the motoring up and down, why is it necessary? The technology for setting up ovens is here with us. I take the same thing with Millie Mill. We grow maize in Karoi, we transport it to Harare for milling, and we take the mill back to Kariba. Who is paying for that? So that is nothing to do with Ukraine. It's
equally
us.
tea
It's
from
us.
tea from Chipinge all the way back to Harare, and also needs to be transported back.
Well,
now, what is the Traditional Grain Association doing to curb some of these measures
Yes.
as well as protect
Yes.
some of the interests of the economy?
Yes.
I'm glad I'm sitting with the chairman right now
Okay.
who possibly has the right answer
Okay.
for some of these perhaps careless mistakes, as you've rightly put them.
Well, I use the word careless because it is carelessness.
Yes.
How can we teach our children to say that in 2023 we are moving bread from Marondera to Bulawayo? It doesn't make sense, economic sense.
Let's not just look at the logistics,
Yes.
even the freshness of the bread itself.
Well,
Yeah.
that's another issue. But
Yeah.
the cost. And then it means someone is profiteering, not the farmer here. The transporter is coming now
Oh, yes.
with the fancy vehicles and everything else.
Yeah.
So we are saying, Zimbabweans, our education system is a contributing factor. Glad we are pleased that at least we now have 5.0 education, which is trying to say, analyze the current real situation. Let me highlight what happened 3-4 weeks ago. We all trooped to Mount Darwin. His Excellency led us to Mount Darwin to celebrate our independence. That's a first. We need that daring approach. And if I ask you, why didn't you do it 10 years ago, I can get a clear answer there. But nevertheless, it happened now. So what I'm saying, there's no need now. Let's follow that position, that leadership, which was displayed by His Excellency.
Yes.
By having a milling facility in Mashonaland and Central.
Oh, yes.
Why do we take maize from Mashonaland and Central, bring it to Harare for milling?
Absolutely.
We need a bakery there. We need an abattoir there. That's development.
Yes.
So let's follow up that trend.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that next year, independence celebrations will not be in Harare. They will be elsewhere.
And not
Another
in
rural
Mashonaland
setting up here.
Central.
So
Yeah,
after that,
absolutely.
let's follow up with a milling facility, an abattoir, and a bakery.
Oh, yes.
Then that's minimum. A bakery is district infrastructure. It's not a national infrastructure.
Oh, yes.
The amount of wastage which happens because of moving products from point A to B. Smith did it then because it was a control exercise. If there was mischief in the village by the villagers asking for their rights, he cut off the supply situation.
Oh,
so
yes.
it was a control exercise.
Okay.
So these are some of the issues which we Zimbabweans, we must now revisit and take positions.
Thank you. Revisiting and taking positions and also putting all things to do with devolution into perspective. You did hear it from Mr. Basil Nyabadza himself, the chairman of the TGA, which is the Traditional Grain Association. My name is Kurtley Gwindi. This is Economics 101. Stay tuned. Thank you so much there, and this is still Economics 101 live here on ZBC TV. We are taking care of our economy, and what better way to do it than to discuss one of the players that are the backbone of the economy, and that's all things to do with agriculture. To help me unpack this is a man whose wealth of knowledge in this field goes beyond reasonable doubt, and yes, I am joined in studio by Mr. Basil Nyabadza, who is formerly sitting in his chair as the former chairman of ARDA, but now also speaking in his capacity as the Traditional Grain Producers Association chairman. Mr. Basil, thank you so much for staying with us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And at one time, that is in your previous space that you did occupy, you did say that Zimbabwe's agricultural financing needs an overhaul because banks and other financial institutions were letting down farmers. How far true have you seen that? And what background were you speaking on when you did mention that?
I think we compare what happened in the past and what's happening now. Banks are businesses. They've got a shareholder base. They are motivated by profit. So their responsibility is also very difficult in this current environment. The macro situation in our economy, there are challenges. So banks get nervous because they lose money. So they are very cautious.
Yes.
Nevertheless, there are still opportunities. And I think this is where we want venture capital to come in.
Oh, yes.
Venture capital targets a particular project under terms and conditions where both are participants. The old system where the bank would access you money and then they wait, of course, underpinned by collateral.
Oh, yeah.
Then they wait, things go wrong, then they resort to their collateral position.
Oh, yes.
We would want venture where we say, guys, there is an opportunity. Let's go in together. And we share the proceeds or what outcomes from that. So I think this is where there's still absence of venture capital in our economy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this is a contributing factor. And the fact is that there's now a strong micro position taken on by individuals in Zimbabwe, realizing that, look, the days of getting employed by that big corporate are gone. Let me do what I can.
Which is what I was going to say, entrepreneurship. Where does that put the space of individuals who have keen interest to do things within their own capacity, which has been the current trend. And like you said, it's a micro situation. And at the end of the day, someone in a micro situation may not necessarily have the collateral that you're speaking about. What then must happen? And do you think that, current projects as well as current techniques and measures being taken on by government, for example, Education 5.0. Do you think that that's what could be the resort to solve some of these issues?
We as industry and commerce must strengthen our relationship with institutions of learning, higher learning in particular, technical colleges. We must learn. The 5.0 education system, highlighted by Honorable Professor Morwira, is it's a plus for business. And we now must reach out to particular entities which are scattered throughout our country to say, look, let me give an example. Lupane State University. They must get to know more about coal. Wange is nearby and Vic Falls is nearby. So we go now to Great Zimbabwe University in Chiredzi. They must concentrate much more on sugarcane. So we are saying the distribution of universities throughout our country must now speak to realities. And we must now say, what can we do, for example, at CAT, Chinhoyi University of Technology? What they are spearheading position on cattle, on breeding. So we must now see that what else can they do? So
it's target-specific institutions.
And specialization.
Absolutely.
And we are also saying our colleges have tended to have a degree course, which is normally 4 years. We are now saying perhaps 2 years practicals, 2 years theory. That's what I think we need.
Absolutely.
Not 3 years theory and 1 year practical. Let's do 50-50 because at the end of the day, we are searching for practical solutions to a Zimbabwean situation, economy, which has got peculiar issues. So that change of signal to say, look, you are doing a 4-year degree course, 2 years of which are practical attachment. I think that those are positives.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. A very, very robust look at some of the issues that have to particularly do with the agricultural industry. It's always a pleasure to have you in studio, Mr. Basil Nyabadza. We have been speaking to the TGPA chairman, which is the Traditional Grain Production Association. And yes, we did hear a very, very huge wealth of issues to do with some of the solutions that can assist some of these skyrocketing inflation prices, as well as some of the day-to-day issues, which are things like the cost of bread here in Zimbabwe, as well as a look into the war in Ukraine, Russia, that is currently ravaging our global economy. Now, this is Economics 101, where we get to unpack all these issues and more. Please do catch us the same time, the same place here on ZBC TV. My name is Kurtley Gwindi. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's a pleasant viewing.